Her eyes met his across the crowded school hallway, and for a fleeting moment, time stood still. Then she looked away, just like she always did. David Matthews watched as his daughter's teacher hurried in the opposite direction, clutching her folders to her chest like a shield. The same question echoed in his mind, why does she avoid me? What he couldn't know was that Eliza Bennett had her own painful truth. Looking at him hurt too much. If you're feeling that pull of emotion already, this story might just break your heart before putting it back together again. Like, subscribe, and settle in. Some journeys are worth every minute. David Matthews stood in his kitchen at 6:30 a.m., expertly flipping pancakes while simultaneously packing a lunchbox. At 42, he moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this solo parenting routine for years. The radio played softly in the background, morning light filtering through the windows of the modest suburban home he'd fought to keep after Sarah died. Lily. Breakfast in 5 minutes, he called up the stairs. His daughter's muffled, coming, barely registered over the sizzle of the pan. David glanced at the family calendar hanging on the refrigerator. Parent-teacher conference day was circled in red. His stomach tightened. Another awkward encounter with Ms. Bennett to endure. Lily bounded down the stairs, her dark hair still damp from the shower, school uniform slightly rumpled. At 15, she was the spitting image of her mother, same warm brown eyes, same dimple when she smiled. The resemblance sometimes caught David off guard, a bittersweet reminder of what they'd lost. "Dad, I need $20 for the field trip tomorrow," Lily said, sliding onto a stool at the kitchen island. David placed a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Already signed the permission slip and put the money in your backpack last night. You're the best." She drowned the pancakes in syrup. "And don't forget. Parent-teacher conference after school." "I know." Lily rolled her eyes. "Ms. Bennett probably has a whole list of complaints about my math homework." David frowned. "Is there something I should know about?" "No, it's fine. She's just intense. Always watching me like she's waiting for me to mess up." This was news to David. "I thought you liked Ms. Bennett." "I do. She's actually my favorite teacher." "That's why it's weird." Lily shrugged, mouth full of pancake. "She's different with me than with the other kids. Like, extra careful or something." David filed this information away as he poured himself coffee. His encounters with Eliza Bennett had been brief but consistently strange. She seemed competent and well-liked by students and parents alike, but whenever he approached her, she became flustered and found reasons to cut conversations short. He'd initially chalked it up to her being naturally shy, but after nearly a full school year of the same treatment, he was beginning to take it personally. "Well, we'll sort it out today," he said with more confidence than he felt. Eliza Bennett sat at her desk during her free period, reviewing her notes for the afternoon's parent-teacher conferences. When she reached David Matthews' name, her hand stilled. She took a deep breath and forced herself to read through Lily's file. Lily Matthews was an exceptional student, bright, engaged, with a natural aptitude for literature and decent grades across the board. Her only struggle was in advanced mathematics, but even there, she was making steady progress. There was nothing in her academic performance that warranted special concern. The problem wasn't Lily. It was her father. Eliza closed the file and removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. 6 years had passed, but the memory remained razor-sharp. She'd been fresh out of college, working at her first teaching job in Boston. He wouldn't remember her, they'd never actually met, but she remembered him. How could she forget the man whose wife's death had changed the trajectory of her life? Sarah Matthews' car accident had made local news. Eliza had been driving home from a late faculty meeting when she saw the crash happen right in front of her, the truck running a red light, the sickening impact, the car crumpling like paper. She'd been the first to reach Sarah, had held her hand while waiting for the ambulance, had heard her final words. "Tell David and Lily I love them." Tell them it's not their fault. But Eliza never had. She'd given her statement to the police and fled the scene as soon as the paramedics arrived, overwhelmed by the trauma. For months afterward, she'd been haunted by nightmares, by the knowledge that she carried a dying woman's last message. She'd looked up the family's address, had even driven by their house once, but couldn't bring herself to knock on the door. What right did she have to intrude on their grief? What comfort could a stranger possibly offer? So she'd left Boston, taking a position at a small private school in Connecticut, trying to outrun her guilt. And then, through some cosmic joke, David Matthews and his daughter had appeared in her classroom at the beginning of this school year, having relocated for his job. He hadn't recognized her, why would he, but she'd known him instantly from the newspaper photos following the accident. Every time she saw him, she was transported back to that rainy night, to Sarah's blood on her hands, to the promise she'd never kept. The classroom door opened, startling her. "Ms. Bennett?" It was Principal Hargrove. "Just checking if you need anything before conferences start." Eliza forced a smile. "I'm all set, thank you." "Good. The Matthews are your last appointment, correct?" David called to confirm earlier. Eliza nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. After Principal Hargrove left, Eliza stared at the clock. 5 more hours until she would have to face David Matthews and pretend she wasn't carrying the weight of his wife's last words. The workday dragged for David. As a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm, he usually enjoyed the challenges each project presented, but today he couldn't focus. His mind kept circling back to Lily's comment about Ms. Bennett treating her differently. His daughter had adjusted remarkably well after Sarah's death. The first year had been brutal, nightmares, therapy sessions, a period where she barely spoke. But children were resilient, and Lily had gradually found her way back to something resembling normalcy. She had friends, participated in school activities, and generally seemed like a well-adjusted teenager. If Ms. Bennett was noticing behavioral issues that he wasn't, David needed to know. At 5 o'clock, he parked in the school lot and made his way to the English department. Parents and students milled about the hallways, moving between conference appointments. David checked his watch. They still had 10 minutes before their scheduled time with Ms. Bennett. "Dad!" Lily waved from a bench outside the classroom. "Can we get pizza after this?" "I'm starving." "Depends on what your teacher has to say," David replied with a wink. Lily groaned. "I told you, my grades are fine." "Then pizza it is." The door to Ms. Bennett's classroom opened, and a family emerged. David recognized them vaguely from school functions, the Hendersons and their son, who played on the baseball team with Lily's friend Jason. Ms. Bennett appeared in the doorway, smiling as she said goodbye to the Hendersons. When her gaze landed on David and Lily, the smile faltered almost imperceptibly before she recovered. "Mr. Matthews, Lily, please come in." David followed his daughter into the classroom, noting how Ms. Bennett maintained a careful distance as they entered. She was younger than most of Lily's teachers, probably in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and intelligent green eyes behind stylish glasses. She wore a simple navy dress with a cardigan, professional but not stuffy. Despite her apparent discomfort around him, David couldn't help but notice she was quite attractive. "Please, have a seat." Ms. Bennett gestured to 2 chairs arranged in front of her desk. As they sat, David caught a whiff of her perfume, something light and floral that reminded him of spring. He pushed the thought away, focusing on why they were here. "So," Ms. Bennett began, opening a folder, "I'm pleased to report that Lily is doing exceptionally well in English literature. Her analysis of To Kill a Mockingbird was one of the best in the class." Lily beamed, and David felt a surge of pride. "Her writing shows remarkable maturity and insight," Ms. Bennett continued, addressing her comments primarily to Lily rather than David. "If she maintains this level of work, I'd recommend considering AP English next year." "That's great news," David said. Ms. Bennett nodded without quite meeting his eyes. I've spoken with her other teachers as well. There are some concerns about her math performance, but Mr. Abernathy says she's been attending extra help sessions, which shows commendable initiative. Math isn't really my thing, Lily admitted. Few people are naturally gifted in all subjects, Ms. Bennet said kindly. The important thing is that you're putting in the effort. David watched the interaction with interest. Ms. Bennet seemed perfectly at ease with Lily, warm, encouraging, engaged. It was only when she had to address him directly that the awkwardness returned. Is there anything else we should know? David asked. Lily mentioned you might have some concerns. Ms. Bennet looked surprised. Concerns? She said you watch her more closely than other students. Lily shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Dad, it's not a big deal. A flush crept up Ms. Bennet's neck. I wasn't aware I was doing that. If I've made you uncomfortable, Lily, I sincerely apologize. It's okay, Lily said quickly. I just wondered why. Ms. Bennet's hands trembled slightly as she rearranged papers on her desk. I suppose I see great potential in you, and I want to make sure you're challenged appropriately. The explanation sounded hollow even to David's ears. An awkward silence fell over the room. David had the distinct impression that Ms. Bennet was hiding something, but he couldn't imagine what it might be. Had he offended her somehow? Was there a school policy issue he'd unknowingly violated? Well, Ms. Bennet said brightly, clearly eager to end the meeting, unless you have other questions, I think we've covered everything. David hesitated. Actually, I was hoping to discuss Lily's college preparation. She's only a sophomore, but it's never too early to start thinking about it. Ms. Bennet looked like she wanted to bolt from the room. Perhaps you should schedule an appointment with the guidance counselor? They have more expertise in that area. Of course, David said, increasingly puzzled by her behavior. But as her English teacher, I thought you might have insights about her strengths and potential majors. Dad, Lily interrupted, can we talk about this at home? I'm really hungry. David recognized his daughter's attempt to rescue them all from the uncomfortable situation. Right. Pizza. We should get going. Relief washed over Ms. Bennet's face. Enjoy your dinner. Lily, don't forget your essay is due Monday. As they gathered their things to leave, David made a split-second decision. Ms. Bennet, could I have a quick word in private? The color drained from her face. I have another appointment in 5 minutes. This will only take a moment. Lily, can you wait in the hall? His daughter gave him a curious look but complied, closing the door behind her. Alone with Ms. Bennet, David noticed how she seemed to shrink into herself, putting the desk between them like a barrier. Have I done something to offend you? He asked directly. What? No, of course not. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Then why do you avoid me at every school function? Why do you cut our conversations short? Why do you look at me like? He struggled to find the right words. Like it hurts you to see me? Ms. Bennet's eyes widened, and for a moment, David thought she might actually answer honestly. Then the professional mask slipped back into place. I'm sorry if I've given that impression, Mr. Matthews. I assure you, it's nothing personal. I'm simply very busy with my teaching responsibilities. David didn't believe her for a second, but he also recognized a wall when he saw one. All right. Thank you for your time. As he turned to leave, Ms. Bennet called after him. Mr. Matthews? He paused at the door. Yes? Lily is a wonderful girl. You've done an amazing job raising her. The unexpected compliment caught him off guard. Thank you. Outside in the hallway, Lily was waiting with an expectant expression. Well? Did you figure out why she's weird around us? No, David admitted. But I'm starting to think it might have nothing to do with us at all. As they walked to the car, David couldn't shake the feeling that Eliza Bennet was carrying a burden that somehow, inexplicably, involved him. Eliza sat alone in her classroom long after the last conference had ended, her head in her hands. She'd nearly broken down when David asked why looking at him hurt her. How had he seen through her so easily? For 6 years, she'd carried Sarah's last words like stones in her pocket, the weight of them pulling her down a little more each day. And now, face to face with the man who should have heard them, she was paralyzed by guilt and fear. What would he think if he knew? Would he hate her for keeping silent all these years? Would he blame her for not doing more to save Sarah? Or worse, would he be grateful to her, when she deserved no gratitude? Eliza gathered her belongings with shaking hands. She needed to make a decision. Either find a way to interact normally with David Matthews, or request that Lily be transferred to another English section for the remainder of the year. The latter would raise questions she couldn't answer, but the former seemed impossible after today's confrontation. As she locked her classroom door, Eliza's phone chimed with a text from her sister, Claire. "Don't forget, dinner at my place tomorrow. 7 p.m. No excuses this time." Eliza sighed. Claire had been trying to set her up with a colleague for weeks, insisting that at 32, Eliza needed to get back in the game. What Claire didn't understand was that Eliza's reluctance to date wasn't just about being busy with work. How could she build a relationship with anyone when she was still haunted by a promise she'd failed to keep? Walking to her car in the nearly empty parking lot, Eliza made a decision. She would tell David Matthews the truth. Not immediately, she needed time to prepare, to figure out exactly what to say, but soon. Before the school year ended. She owed him that much. What she didn't expect was to find him leaning against her car, waiting for her. David hadn't planned to ambush Ms. Bennet in the parking lot. After dropping Lily at her friend's house for a sleepover, he'd intended to head home. Instead, he found himself driving back to the school, compelled by an instinct he couldn't explain. Something about Eliza Bennet's reaction to him went beyond ordinary awkwardness or dislike. The pain in her eyes when he'd confronted her was real and deep. It nagged at him, a puzzle piece that didn't fit anywhere in the picture of his life. So he waited by her car, recognizing it from the faculty parking section, hoping for a chance to clear the air. When she appeared, clutching her bag and lost in thought, David almost lost his nerve. This was inappropriate, borderline stalkerish behavior. He should leave. But then she looked up and saw him, and the flash of recognition, followed by something like resignation, in her eyes kept him rooted to the spot. "Mr. Matthews," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "Is everything all right? Is Lily okay?" "Lily's fine," he assured her quickly. "I'm sorry to surprise you like this. I felt like our conversation earlier was unfinished." Ms. Bennet's knuckles whitened around the strap of her bag. "It's been a long day. Could this wait until—" "I know my wife," David interrupted. Ms. Bennet froze. "What?" "I know my wife died 6 years ago. I know that's around when you left your teaching position in Boston. I know because I looked you up after our meeting today." David took a deep breath. "What I don't know is how these things are connected, but I think they must be, because nothing else explains why you look at me like you've seen a ghost." For a long moment, Ms. Bennet said nothing. Then, to David's alarm, tears filled her eyes. "Not here," she whispered. "Please." David immediately regretted his approach. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here," she said, wiping her eyes. "I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. David nodded, stepping away from her car. "Thank you." As he walked to his own vehicle, David wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Whatever connection existed between Eliza Bennet and Sarah's death, he was about to uncover it. After 6 years of rebuilding his life around the gaping hole Sarah's absence had left, was he ready for whatever revelation awaited? The coffee shop was quiet for a Friday evening, with only a few patrons scattered among the mismatched tables. David chose a corner booth, away from the other customers, and ordered 2 coffees. He was halfway through his when Eliza Bennett walked in. She'd removed her glasses and let her hair down, making her look younger and more vulnerable. She spotted him immediately and made her way over, sliding into the seat across from him. "I got you coffee," David said, pushing the second cup toward her. "I hope that's okay." "Thank you." She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. David waited, giving her space to gather her thoughts. The silence stretched between them, filled with the soft background music and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, Eliza looked up. "I was there when your wife died." Of all the things David had imagined she might say, this wasn't one of them. The words hit him like a physical blow. "What do you mean, you were there?" "I was driving home from work. It was raining. I saw the accident happen right in front of me, the truck running the red light, hitting your wife's car." Eliza's voice was barely audible. "I was the first person to reach her." David's mind reeled. He'd read the police report, knew there had been witnesses, but he'd never sought them out. The details of that night were a blur of hospital corridors and devastating news. "You were the woman who called 911, he said slowly, remembering a detail from the report. Eliza nodded. "I stayed with her until the ambulance came. I held her hand. She was conscious, at first." David's throat constricted. "She spoke to you?" "Yes." Eliza's eyes filled with tears again. "She told me to tell you and Lily that she loved you. That it wasn't your fault." The coffee shop faded away. David was transported back to that night, to the argument he'd had with Sarah before she left to pick up takeout for dinner. Something trivial about household chores that had escalated because they were both tired and stressed. The last words he'd spoken to his wife had been angry ones. "I never delivered the message," Eliza continued, her voice breaking. "I gave my statement to the police and left. I was in shock, I think. And then days passed, and I didn't know how to approach you, a grieving husband and father. What right did I have to insert myself into your tragedy? So I convinced myself it would only make things worse." David struggled to process what he was hearing. For 6 years, he'd lived with the guilt of that final argument, never knowing that Sarah's last thoughts had been of forgiveness. "But I couldn't forget," Eliza said. "I couldn't forget her, or the promise I didn't keep. I left Boston, thinking distance would help. And then, by some cosmic joke, you and Lily showed up at my new school. You recognized me," David said, understanding dawning. "From the newspaper photos after the accident, yes. You didn't know me, we'd never met, but every time I saw you, all I could think about was Sarah, and how I'd failed her." "Failed you both?" David sat back, overwhelmed. "That's why you've been avoiding me. Why looking at me hurts you." Eliza nodded miserably. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Matthews. I should have told you years ago. I have no excuse." "David," he said automatically. "Please call me David." They sat in silence again, the weight of the past hanging between them. David's mind was a storm of emotions, grief freshly awakened, anger at the years of unnecessary guilt, gratitude for finally knowing Sarah's last words, and something else he couldn't quite name. "What was she like?" he asked suddenly. "At the end?" Eliza looked startled by the question. "She was brave. She wasn't panicking, even though she must have been in pain. Her main concern was for you and Lily." She hesitated. She was wearing a silver necklace with a small star pendant. She kept touching it while we talked. David's breath caught. The necklace had been his gift to Sarah on their 10th anniversary, just months before the accident. He'd forgotten about it until this moment. "The paramedics took it off when they were trying to help her," Eliza continued. "It got mixed up with my things somehow. I didn't realize until later. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I've carried it with me, thinking that someday I might find the courage to return it. She placed the pouch on the table between them. With trembling fingers, David opened it and tipped the contents into his palm. The silver star gleamed under the coffee shop lights, its chain tangled but intact. Lily should have this, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm so sorry, Eliza repeated. I know an apology isn't enough, but I truly am sorry for keeping this from you. David closed his hand around the necklace, feeling its edges press into his palm. I don't know what to say. Part of me wants to be angry with you. You have every right to be. But mostly, I'm just grateful. David met her eyes. For being with her at the end. For telling me now, even though it was difficult. For keeping this safe for Lily. Eliza looked away, unable to bear the kindness in his gaze. I should go. I've imposed on your evening enough. As she started to rise, David reached across the table and caught her hand. The contact surprised them both. Wait, he said. Please. Eliza slowly sat back down, her hand still in his. For 6 years, I've been carrying the weight of our last conversation, David said. Wondering if Sarah died thinking I was angry with her. Wondering if she knew how much I loved her, despite that stupid fight. His voice broke. You've given me a gift today, Eliza. Peace I didn't think I'd ever find. I should have given it to you sooner. Yes, David agreed. But you're giving it now, and that matters. He released her hand, and Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, as if suddenly cold. What happens now? She asked. It was a question David hadn't considered. What did happen when a stranger appeared with your dead wife's last words and the necklace you'd given her? There was no protocol for this situation. I need to tell Lily, he said. About her mother's message. About the necklace. Eliza nodded. Of course. Would you be willing to meet with us? To tell Lily what you told me? I think it would mean a lot to her. The request clearly surprised Eliza. If you think it would help, yes. Thank you. David hesitated. And after that? I don't know. I guess we go back to being Lily's father and Lily's teacher. Something flickered in Eliza's eyes, disappointment? Relief? David couldn't tell. That would probably be best, she said softly. But as they exchanged phone numbers to arrange the meeting with Lily, David found himself reluctant to end their conversation. For the first time in years, he felt connected to Sarah in a way that didn't hurt. And strangely, he felt connected to Eliza Bennett too, this woman who had shared his wife's final moments, who had carried the burden of that experience for so long. It's getting late, Eliza said, glancing at her watch. I should go. This time, David didn't stop her. Drive safely. As she walked away, David remained at the table, turning Sarah's necklace over in his hands, wondering why he felt like he'd just found something important, only to let it slip away again. The weekend passed in a blur for Eliza. She alternated between relief that the truth was finally out and anxiety about meeting with Lily. How would the girl react to learning that her English teacher had been present at her mother's death? Would she blame Eliza for keeping silent all these years? By Sunday evening, Eliza was a bundle of nerves. David had texted to arrange the meeting for Monday after school, at their home rather than in her classroom. The change of venue made sense. This wasn't a school matter, but it also crossed a boundary that Eliza had carefully maintained. When Monday arrived, Eliza found it nearly impossible to focus on teaching. Lily was in her third period class, and Eliza couldn't help watching the girl more closely than usual, noting the features she shared with her mother, the shape of her eyes, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. After the final bell, Eliza gathered her things and headed to the address David had provided. It was a modest colonial in a quiet neighborhood, with with well-tended flower beds and a basketball hoop over the garage. Eliza sat in her car for several minutes, gathering her courage, before finally approaching the front door. David answered her knock almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting nearby. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping back to let her in. The house was warm and lived in, with family photos lining the hallway and a stack of mail on the entryway table. It smelled of something baking, cookies, maybe. "Lily's in the living room," David said, leading the way. "I've told her that you have something important to share about her mother, but not the details." Lily was curled up on the couch, her phone in hand. She looked up when they entered, curiosity and wariness mingling in her expression. "Hi, Ms. Bennett," she said, sitting up straighter. "Dad said you knew my mom?" Eliza's heart raced. In a manner of speaking, yes. She perched on the edge of an armchair, while David took a seat beside his daughter. "This might be difficult to hear, Lily, but I want to be completely honest with you." Over the next 20 minutes, Eliza recounted the story she'd told David at the coffee shop, careful to include Sarah's exact words but spare Lily the more graphic details of the accident. Throughout, Lily sat very still, her eyes fixed on Eliza's face, occasionally glancing at her father for confirmation. When Eliza finished, the room fell silent. David reached into his pocket and withdrew the velvet pouch. "Ms. Bennett returned this as well," he said, placing it in Lily's hands. "It was your mother's necklace. The one with the star that she always wore." Lily opened the pouch with trembling fingers. When the necklace slid into her palm, a small sound escaped her, part gasp, part sob. "I remember this," she whispered. "She never took it off. It was my gift to her for our 10th anniversary," David explained. "I thought you might want to have it." Lily clutched the necklace to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "She really said it wasn't our fault?" "Those were her exact words," Eliza confirmed gently. Lily turned to her father. "You always said the accident wasn't because of our fight, but I never really believed you." David's eyes widened. "You knew about that?" "I heard you arguing before she left. I thought if I hadn't asked for takeout, if you hadn't been fighting." Lily's voice broke. David pulled his daughter into a fierce hug. "Oh, Lily. I had no idea you were carrying that. It was never your fault. Never." Eliza watched them, feeling like an intruder on their grief and healing. She rose quietly, intending to slip out and give them privacy. "Don't go," Lily said, noticing her movement. She wiped her eyes and looked at Eliza with an expression that was suddenly much older than 15. "Thank you for being with her. For not letting her be alone." The simple gratitude undid Eliza completely. Tears she'd been holding back spilled over. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "You're telling us now," Lily said, echoing her father's words from the coffee shop. "That's what matters." David met Eliza's eyes over his daughter's head, and something passed between them, an understanding, a shared relief, a tentative connection. "Would you stay for dinner?" Lily asked suddenly. "I want to hear more about that night." "About Mom." Eliza hesitated, looking to David for guidance. "We'd like it if you stayed," he said quietly. "If you can." And so Eliza found herself sitting at the Matthews kitchen table, sharing a meal and memories of a woman she'd known for only minutes but who had changed the course of her life. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere gradually lightened. Lily asked questions about her mother, but also about Eliza's teaching career, her favorite books, her opinion on the latest Netflix series. By the time they were clearing the dishes, a tentative ease had developed between the three of them. Lily insisted on showing Eliza her art portfolio, proudly displaying sketches that revealed genuine talent. "These are remarkable," Eliza said, genuinely impressed. "You have a real gift, Lily." "Mom was artistic too," David commented from the doorway. "She used to sketch all the time." I didn't know that, Lily said, surprised. There's a box of her sketchbooks in the attic. I should bring them down for you. As Lily excused herself to take a phone call from a friend, David and Eliza found themselves alone in the living room. Thank you, he said simply. This evening has been healing, I think. For both of us. I'm glad, Eliza replied. Lily is an extraordinary young woman. You've done an amazing job raising her. It hasn't always been easy, David admitted. There were days I wasn't sure I was doing anything right. All evidence suggests otherwise. A comfortable silence fell between them. Eliza glanced at her watch, surprised to see how late it had grown. I should be going, she said. School tomorrow. David nodded. Of course. He walked her to the door, where they paused awkwardly. They were no longer just teacher and parent, but not quite friends either. They occupied some undefined space in between. Good night, David, Eliza said finally. Good night, Eliza. As she drove home, Eliza felt lighter than she had in years, as if a burden she'd carried for so long had finally been set down. She'd expected anger, resentment, even hatred from the Matthews family. Instead, she'd found forgiveness and gratitude. It was more than she deserved, but exactly what she needed. What she hadn't expected was the small, persistent thought that kept surfacing as she replayed the evening. She wanted to see David Matthews again, in a context that had nothing to do with Sarah or Lily or the past. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. Spring gave way to summer. Lily completed her sophomore year with excellent grades, including a solid B+ in math. David's engineering firm landed a major contract that would keep him busy through the fall. And Eliza accepted a position teaching a creative writing workshop at the local community college, in addition to her regular teaching job. They maintained a careful distance. At the end-of-year academic awards ceremony, where Lily received recognition for her achievements in English and art, David and Eliza exchanged polite smiles and brief congratulations. To casual observers, they appeared to be nothing more than a parent and teacher with a cordial relationship. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. David found himself thinking about Eliza at odd moments, wondering what book she was currently reading, whether she'd enjoyed the documentary he'd mentioned during their dinner, if she still carried the weight of guilt or if she too had found some measure of peace. July brought a heatwave and the annual town summer festival. David and Lily attended as they did every year, sampling food from local vendors and listening to the community band perform in the park. As evening fell and the crowd gathered for the fireworks display, David spotted a familiar figure sitting alone on a blanket at the edge of the field. "Isn't that Ms. Bennett?" Lily asked, following his gaze. "I think it is," David replied, trying to sound casual. Lily gave him a knowing look. "We should invite her to join us. It's weird to watch fireworks by yourself." Before David could respond, Lily was already making her way through the crowd toward her teacher. He followed, equal parts nervous and eager. Eliza looked up in surprise as they approached. She was wearing a summer dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking more relaxed than David had ever seen her. "Lily, Mr. Matthews," she greeted them, starting to rise. "How nice to see you." "Stay put," Lily said. "We're crashing your fireworks viewing spot, if that's okay." Eliza laughed. "Of course. There's plenty of room." They settled onto the blanket, Lily immediately launching into a detailed account of her summer art camp experience. As she talked, David noticed how easily Eliza engaged with her, asking thoughtful questions and offering genuine encouragement. When the fireworks began, Lily scooted forward for a better view, leaving David. Eliza sitting side by side. In the darkness, with colorful explosions illuminating the sky, David found the courage to speak. "I've been thinking about you," he admitted quietly. Eliza turned to him, her face alternately lit by blue and red and gold as the fireworks continued overhead. "I've been thinking about you too." This is probably inappropriate, David said. You're Lily's teacher. Not during summer break, Eliza pointed out. And she'll be in Mr. Peterson's English section next year. I checked. David smiled at the implication that she'd been considering this possibility too. In that case, would you like to have dinner sometime? Just the two of us? In the brief silence that followed, David worried he'd misread the situation entirely. Then Eliza's hand found his on the blanket between them. I'd like that very much, she said. As another burst of fireworks drew gasps from the crowd, David intertwined his fingers with hers. It felt both terrifying and right, this tentative step toward something new. Lily glanced back at them, a knowing smile spreading across her face before she tactfully returned her attention to the sky. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant outside of town, where they were unlikely to run into students or colleagues. The conversation flowed easily, moving from books to films to travel dreams, carefully skirting around the circumstances of their connection. Until dessert, when Eliza set down her fork and looked directly at David. I need to ask you something, she said. And I need you to be completely honest. David nodded, suddenly apprehensive. Are you interested in me because of my connection to Sarah? Because I was with her at the end? The question caught him off guard, but he recognized its importance. He considered his answer carefully. That connection is part of our history, he said finally. I can't pretend it isn't. But no, that's not why I'm sitting here with you tonight. He reached across the table for her hand. I'm here because in the past few months, I've glimpsed a woman who is kind, intelligent, passionate about literature and teaching, and somehow manages to make me laugh even when we're discussing school budget cuts. Eliza's expression softened. I needed to be sure. For both our sakes. What about you? David asked. Why are you here with me? Not out of guilt or obligation, if that's what you're wondering, Eliza replied. I'm here because when I'm with you, I feel like I can finally be myself, all of myself, including the parts that have been shaped by difficult experiences. I don't have to pretend or hide. They left the restaurant hand in hand, the weight of the past still present but no longer standing between them. As summer waned, their relationship deepened. They took things slowly, mindful of Lily's feelings and the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. David was careful not to compare Eliza to Sarah, and Eliza was careful not to insert herself too quickly into Lily's life. But gradually, inevitably, the boundaries began to blur. Eliza joined them for movie nights and Sunday brunches. She helped Lily with her summer reading assignments and offered feedback on her art portfolio for college applications. David found himself calling Eliza first when he had news to share or needed advice about parenting a teenager. By the time school resumed in September, with Lily now a junior in a different English teacher's class, Eliza had become a fixture in their lives. Are you and Ms. Bennett officially a thing now? Lily asked one evening as she and David washed dishes together. David nearly dropped the plate he was drying. Would that bother you if we were? Lily rolled her eyes. Dad, I've been watching you two dance around each other for months. It's actually kind of cute, in a middle-aged way. I'm 43, not 60, David protested. Whatever. The point is, I like her. She makes you happy. And she doesn't try to replace Mom. David set down the dish towel and turned to face his daughter. No one could ever replace your mother, Lily. You know that, right? I know. Lily's expression grew serious. But Mom's been gone for 7 years now. She'd want you to be happy. David pulled his daughter into a hug, marveling at her maturity and wisdom. When did you get so grown up? Probably around the time you started giggling at your phone like a teenager whenever Ms. Bennett texts you, Lily teased, pulling away. I do not giggle, David insisted, but he was smiling. That night, he called Eliza and told her about the conversation. So we have Lily's blessing, Eliza said, her voice warm through the phone. It appears so, David replied. Which means I can finally ask you properly, Eliza Bennet, would you be my girlfriend? Her laughter filled his ear. That sounds very high school, but yes, David Matthews, I would be honored to be your girlfriend. Autumn painted the town in shades of red and gold. Eliza and David settled into a comfortable rhythm, spending weekends together and several evenings each week. They navigated the occasional raised eyebrow from school parents with good humor, and weathered the brief storm of teenage gossip when students discovered their English teacher was dating Lily Matthews' dad. On a crisp October evening, exactly 1 year after their coffee shop conversation, David took Eliza to a lookout point overlooking the town. The trees below them were a riot of color, the setting sun casting everything in a golden glow. It's beautiful, Eliza said, leaning against the railing. Yes, you are, David replied, wrapping an arm around her waist. She bumped him with her hip. That was terribly cheesy. But effective, he noted, kissing her temple. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. David had been carrying a small velvet box in his pocket all day, waiting for the right moment. This wasn't it, not yet, but soon. He wanted to do this right, to honor both the past and the future they were building. What are you thinking about? Eliza asked, noticing his distraction. Life, David said honestly. How unpredictable it is. How the worst day of my life eventually led me to one of the best people I've ever known. Eliza turned in his arms to face him. I used to think that night defined me, that I'd always be the woman who failed to deliver a dying wish. But you and Lily showed me that our worst moments don't have to be our defining ones. They shape us, David agreed. But they don't limit us. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, David held Eliza close, grateful for second chances and unexpected beginnings. The ring in his pocket could wait for another day. They had time, a future stretching before them, unwritten and full of possibility. 3 years later, Eliza stood in the crowded auditorium, watching as Lily Matthews crossed the stage to receive her college diploma. Beside her, David clutched her hand, his eyes shining with pride and tears. That's our girl, he whispered. Our girl. The words still had the power to move Eliza deeply. In the 2 years since their wedding, Lily had become as much her daughter as if she'd raised her from birth. Different from Sarah, yes, but no less loved. After the ceremony, they found Lily amidst the sea of graduates, her cap askew and her smile radiant. Congratulations, sweetheart, David said, enveloping her in a hug. We're so proud of you, Eliza added, taking her turn to embrace the young woman who had once been her student. Lily stepped back, her expression suddenly serious. I have something for you both. She reached into her graduation gown and pulled out a small package. I've been working on this for months. David unwrapped it carefully, revealing a framed pencil sketch. It showed the three of them, David, Eliza, and Lily, sitting on their living room couch. But behind them, rendered in softer lines, was the transparent figure of a woman with Lily's eyes and smile, her hand resting protectively on David's shoulder. Mom's always been with us, Lily explained softly. I wanted to show that. Eliza felt tears spring to her eyes. The drawing captured perfectly what they'd all come to understand, that love didn't end with death, that new beginnings didn't erase precious memories, that family could be both what you lost and what you found. It's perfect, David said, his voice thick with emotion. As they stood together, the framed drawing held carefully between them, Eliza thought about the long, winding path that had led them here. From a rainy night in Boston to a sun-drenched graduation day. From strangers connected by tragedy to a family bound by love. Looking at David no longer hurt. Instead, it filled her with gratitude and joy, for the man he was, for the life they'd built together, and for the unexpected gift of second chances. Sometimes, the most beautiful stories begin with the words we're most afraid to speak. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to our channel for more emotional journeys that remind us of the healing power of love and the unexpected ways our lives can intertwine. Share in the comments if you've ever experienced a moment where pain transformed into something beautiful. Your story might inspire someone else who's still finding their way through grief to hope.